In the coming months, a bunch of talking heads are going to tell you that Trump won because of this minority or that minority, because Dems were too progressive or not progressive enough. I think this is futile. Why? Because the real problem is that Republicans are liars and no one cares. On a previous video of mine, fellow creator JJ McCullough made a comment that I disliked. Despite being an establishment lib, I respect JJ as a creator and commentator and as a general ally. But he asked, "It seems a difficult reality that has to be confronted in some form, is that a lot of people really believe the trans rights movement has gone too far. Is it possible for some of what's being done in the name of trans rights to be so far beyond what the public is ready for that it becomes counterproductive?" And not to suck myself off, but I think what I said in response is worth repeating. The problem is not trans people. Sure, the Kamala is for they, them ads were generally effective.
Kamala's agenda is they, them, not you.
But the transgender issue was far down on the list of voter priorities in this election. But watch what the libs are about to do. The New York Times today ran the following headline: "On transgender issues, voters want common sense." Actually, I don't think voters want common sense. Over a third of Americans still think that the 2020 election was stolen. A quarter of conservatives believe that Satan-worshipping pedophiles run a global sex trafficking operation to control the US government. I am not making this up. The problem is not transgender people. The problem is that Republicans are allowed to lie with impunity. The problem is that no one wants to hold the right wing accountable for lying. No one gives a shit. To reiterate something I said in my comment, every social movement has, throughout history, in one shape or form, been asked this question: maybe you're taking it too far. Now, I don't necessarily think it's a bad question to ask. In a healthy democracy, an informed public constantly negotiates norms, meanings, identities on the basis of some shared fundamental values and facts. But if our information environment is in shambles, and it is, then this isn't possible. No one knows what gender-affirming care looks like. We can't even have the conversation because it is impossible to have a conversation when one side is allowed to lie and lie and lie. There are no mainstream Democratic legislators or even fringe Democratic legislators who are explicitly advocating for transgender operations on illegal aliens in prisons
transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison
as their main talking points. And when confronted about this, Kamala has to step on eggshells and moderate herself to hell. When asked about gender-affirming care for prisoners, she said,
"I will follow the law, just as I think Donald Trump would say he did. His policy was no different."
Which is true. During the Trump administration, federal prisoners had access to gender-affirming care. Yet Kamala had to completely moderate her messaging. She's not coming out with a pride flag and a copy of Judith Butler's Bodies That Matter. She's using technocratic liberal moderate rhetoric. Basically, if expert medical doctors say that it's necessary under the law, then I'll follow the law. But oh my God, when has a Republican ever been held to such a high of a standard? Marjorie Taylor Greene is a sitting congresswoman who, in response to the recent hurricane season, unironically spread conspiracy theories about weather manipulation. Yes, they can control the weather. What? How could anyone say that trans people are to blame when these are the conditions of political discourse? Have trans people gone too far? It doesn't even matter, because conservatives have made it so that reality doesn't mean anything anymore. It just feels disingenuous to me to hold trans people accountable, no matter how extreme, for this situation when Republicans, mainstream Republicans, are never held accountable for their complete disregard for law, truth, or liberal values. You cannot win when your opponent will not play by the rules and when nobody will enforce the rules. You can't win an argument with an opponent who cannot agree on your reality. Moderating on trans issues will not work because Republicans will just lie. Why did people vote for Trump? I think the answer doesn't have to do with trans people at all. People remembered the inflation from a couple years ago and didn't like it. Incumbents around the world are losing for this very reason. If our information environment were better, maybe one day we'll finally break out of the cycle of Republican presidents destroying the economy, Democratic presidents fixing it, and Republicans taking all the credit. Maybe with a better information environment, voters would realize that Under a Biden administration, as a direct result of his policies, the U.S. economy is outperforming the rest of the world. Real wages are growing for the working class, and inflation is down. Maybe voters would realize that Trump's proposed tariffs would cause widespread inflation way beyond what Kamala had proposed. I don't know what the solution to this is, but I do know that blaming a scapegoat isn't going to make the price of eggs any cheaper.